I'll look for that map later, Mike.
Hey guys, this is the Game Academy and Storm Buddy Studios coming to you live. It's 11 a.m. on Monday, December 14th, and we're here to talk to you about the project Scourge of Shiran. It's an adventure that we are writing at the Game Academy using the World of Alessia game setting, game world, that's published by Storm Buddy Studios. We've got Jaye Sonia from Storm Buddy Studios. We've got, awesome. We've got Stephen Radley McFarlane, who's going to join us right here. Hey, Stephen, we are live right now. I'm bringing you right into the chat, and it's good timing. We're just doing introductions. So,
excellent.
Stephen Radley McFarlane is one of our writers on the book. Yo'el Erez is also a writer on the book. Michael Azzolino, a writer on the book, and a board member of the Game Academy. And I myself am the guy who runs the show over at the Game Academy, and I have a few creative things I put into the mix as well. So we're here to discuss, we have the ability to take questions, of course, but we're going to talk about how the game Scourge of Shiran fits within the world of Alessia, some of the new things that it brings to players of World of Alessia, some new character classes, some new sub-species, and some interesting cities, cultural elements, and then I'll be able to talk a little bit about why the Scourge of Shiran is being made as an educational game and what that exactly means. Does that mean that you can't play it if you're not a student? No, of course not. It just means we're doing something that I think I've never seen before, where we're taking the game itself and integrating it into learning objectives that you might have as an educator, and it should be seamless to the player, but it allows you to kind of tie in ahead of time with whatever you're doing in your classes, and if we have our stretch goals, we'll be able to put in some actual problem sets that we can create ourselves. So let's get started. Jay, I'd like for you to just take a moment and tell us a little bit about World of Alessia. We talked during the fundraiser a couple weeks back, and you did a great job. That's actually on YouTube. If anybody wants to watch that, that's about an hour long, where we were chatting. Jaye Menenging, I'm just butchering his name.
He's in Finland right now. Like, what are you doing? No.
If he was here, he would be able to say his name better than me. Menenging, that's right. My coffee is still taking effect. He might be able to join us. He's the person who brought the project to you.
He's the world builder. He is the
for the record.
Yep, thank you, sir. But he was the heart and soul of Alessia. He created it. He pitched it to us back in, about the fall of 2017. It's a funny story because when he pitched it, he had all this art set up, and he was like, "Oh, look at this," and I thought it was all stolen art from Blizzard. So I was like, "You can't use this," and it's just funny. But as far as Alessia goes, he wanted to build a world that was. He wanted to bring his kids to the table and their friends, and be able to run a world that didn't have the same historical cultural assumptions that are common to a lot of fantasy worlds. It's not to say that everybody does this. No one's pointing any fingers, but he wanted to kind of step away from some of the Tolkien-based kind of fantasy assumptions and create a world where these species were far in the future, had evolved, and a lot of the preconditioned kind of racial hatreds that exist in a lot of fantasy games were non-existent. So we explored this, and we just started building it. So we ended up with a world with like 27 different species. They've all evolved in Alessia. It's in its 7th age. It still has problems. It has all all kinds of different modern problems that it has to address. But a lot of the cultural assumptions throughout the world are not based on this entire race of elves trying to have making war with orcs, for instance, because those events simply never took place. So Alessia is a different kind of world.
Right. It's not only a different world culturally, but it's also, geologically quite different. Right now we have the version that is built to run with 5e. That game, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say its name in public or whatever. There's always a problem. I don't want to step over lines, but the game we're talking about.
You can reference Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. The world's greatest role-playing game.
Right. Yeah. Okay, protecting your brand is important, guys. That's important. But when I think Dungeons and Dragons, except if I kind of reach back to Spelljammer, I don't think sci-fi or sci-fantasy. I really think just sort of hardcore fantasy. And World of Alessia is not that. It really is steeped in a grounding of science. Right. The planet itself is an interesting one. It is bending some rules, but the reasons that are given are ones that I think even those who are scientifically minded will like, okay, I'll give that a pass. That sounds feasible.
At least you thought about it. Thanks a lot.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the other thing that I think is rather interesting is that, when I think science fiction, I think, space combat and multiple planets and species coming from different planets. And that's not really what we have here. What we have is sort of a terrestrial based world where everything's kind of happening on the surface of the planet because it's been turned into a protectorate or a terrarium by the gods of good, right? Yeah. And I think that is a very interesting take on things because you're looking at a group of inhabitants that really don't have an escape valve. There's no frontier for them to investigate out off the planet.
Well, there is. That's the thing, and that's right. They don't need to necessarily go off the world because they're living in such a small portion of such a large space. There is their imperative to search and investigate, and I mean it's mitigated some with skyships and so on and so forth. But they have a lot of environmental concerns that they have to take into consideration, and that, like all places, limits some of that travel. So there's a bit of a truck. So we still wanted there to be places like Shiran where there's that feeling of frontier. Right, and there's geological issues to deal with, like shard storms. So at certain altitudes, of course, those are mitigated just by being higher than them. But landing and all of the conditions of the planet itself can make exploration still exciting and fun. So we wanted to focus on the terrestrial for now. We had set stretch goals to explore the rings of heaven and some of the other elements that are native to this world, but really those things take a lot of time and a lot of money. So we had to shelve those things for the time being. So we'll definitely be exploring them in the future though.
Right. No, that's fantastic. And the thing I think that really clinched this project for me, and I know that it was exciting for Mike as well, is not just that the world of Alessia is such an amazingly cool world to set educationally based games in, because the culture is one where you're not tripping over landmines of previous assumptions of racism or classism or such.
And let me be clear, I don't think people intended that. I think it's just things that get passed down over time.
Inherited, right.
Yeah, it's inherited, and we were building from a foundation that we didn't have to inherit any of that. So it wasn't, our classic fantasy gamers are going to be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense, and that's also okay, right?
Right.
We just
I think that gives us two things. One thing is you have really, you and Jaye have taken your time to look over and make conscious decisions about things, and really to say, why is this in here? Is this in here for a reason? Is this what we want? Right. And then secondly, you've got a world that, can you guys hear me okay? I'm getting a little stutter on my side.
You're coming clear for me.
Okay, yeah. Good. All right, so it's just on my side. That's fine. The second thing is that you offered us at the Game Academy the sort of real estate of an entire continent to develop, and that is, I mean, for a game creator, that to me is such a level of trust that I'm honored, and I feel the weight of that responsibility. And I wanted to thank the Storm Bunny Studios for that, and Mike, I know that when we heard
really
this,
Yeti too, really Yeti,
oh yeah,
absolutely. It's like as a publisher, I could encourage that, but that's Yeti's call, and he was like, you know what, the fact that they're going to go create a space with education on a frontier, it's in keeping with what he had planned with Shiran, and he just was excited about it. So the thanks really needs to go in his direction. So
right,
yeah,
right,
I will communicate that.
Yep,
indeed.
Right. So I want to hear more about Shiran. I want to hear what Shiran, how it sits in the world of Alessia, how it relates to the overall. I mean, so far the primer is dealing with only a small portion of the planet's surface, and it's really around this empire and its associate related lands, right? So where does Shiran fit into that picture?
Shiran is in a lot of ways sort of without the gold rush elements of, say, like the early 18th century, late 17th century, like, as you're exploring middle America, it's definitely got, or going out to the West Coast, it's got that very frontiers, unsettled. There's a lot of weird things happening in Shiran, which is why it isn't and hasn't been as populated yet. But south of the mountain reaches, there's definitely there's a lot of wild nature. There's lots of shamans and such. So we didn't want to, of course, say too much about the space because we did give you guys room to move in that area. And really, Yeti's got a whole bunch of notes that he has, so I have to be careful about saying yes. But the things I will, or yes or no about this or that. But for certain, one of the things I get excited about are the megafauna, because they have these massive terrestrial, like these gargantuan, like Roombas, basically, that are going around north of the mountain ranges throughout the vastness, and they're sort of terraforming the space, but they're also cleaning it. And even the people of Alessia aren't quite sure what's going on. And every once in a while, the Rings of Heaven, like if one of these things gets destroyed, they deploy another one. So it's on this automated system, and well, from an objective standpoint, we know, there's some terraforming happening, that there's some land management happening, on the part of the actual world itself. The people of Alessia do not. And these are these great celestial mysterious events that they're trying to figure out. So sometimes things happen, these planetfall events happen, and megafauna pop out, and they're a net good that they don't fully understand.
Right.
And sometimes other things fall, and they aren't good, and they have to respond quite differently.
Right. So this is not a world that is free of conflict or problems.
No.
This is just, we're choosing different ones to focus on. Absolutely. But speaking of those megafauna, Yo'el Erez, let's talk a little bit about the megafauna we have in the vastness. This is the frozen tundra, and it turns out that these things have picked up a symbiotic relationship with a species known as the year, right? So let's talk a little bit about the year. Yo'el, you've done a great deal of work on this group, so I'd love for you to introduce it and talk a little bit about who they are.
Sure, yeah. So the year definitely, they've, as you said, created this symbiotic relationship with the megafauna, with a specific kind of megafauna that shows up a lot in vastness. And they're like these little tiny rabbit creatures that have built their warrens in the megafauna. What's really interesting for me about that whole setup is that you start out with these gigantic creatures that are sort of alive, sort of not alive, kind of half mechanism, half creature, and then somehow yet again they're half like magical. And so you've got this thing that could potentially move around by itself and do things by itself, but then now you have this culture of creatures that have come into it and have started to help it to function and to move it around. And so that's developed over however long, to such an extent that you have megafauna in the region that are dormant, that aren't inhabited, and it's maybe they even lost their ability to do it by themselves in that area. They're tended so carefully by the year, by these little rabbits. The rabbits themselves have as much of a culture as I could possibly imbue them with, and I know I've worked a lot closely with both you and with Mike and with Jay, and trying to get these critters to have something that's unique to them, that's not just a carbon copy of other Alessian peoples, and that plays into that little bit that was mentioned about kind of the more shamanic side of things, a little bit more close to nature side of things. without feeling like you're talking about this backwards nation that, you know, finding in the wilderness and they're not up to speed with everyone else. And that's not the goal, right? Because that's not part of the environment that you're trying to build with Alessia. And so being able to, it's actually been an interesting trick to make sure to balance those things, because I think that it's fun to have almost a society out of time is a neat trope, but at the same instance to, oh, okay, I'm still talking. You guys disappeared. At the same instance to basically be able to still connect with them. And of course, all of the people are modern times people, and all of the, the videos is going weird. I think it's I apologize for that. It's because my camera is on Wi-Fi and the rest of it isn't. I'll figure it out if I can. So that's sort of, I guess, the quick overview of the year. I don't know. There should be some stuff that's kept for people to find out midway through. But if there's specific things that you wanted me to talk about that you had in mind, Josh, I'm happy to elucidate.
Well, I just wanted to give a little teaser there. Obviously, I showed the image of one of our special year. This one is one of the scholars that has come out of the year. They tend to be tied to the functioning of their megafauna fairly tightly. In fact, they exhibit one of the features of the world of Alessia's setting that I really dig, which is this idea of creating bonds or connections, right? Which is very similar to what you might think of with Dungeons and Dragons when you are aligning or attuning with your items. Yeah. But this is more complex, and it actually reflects, I think, 3 levels of attunement, which is really interesting. And Jay, maybe have you jump in real quick and talk a little bit about that 3-level attunement.
Well, I mean, I think you're referring to the species synergies, and that can be developed through attunement. But the idea was, and I totally stole that from 3.5, by the way, because you used to have these things back in older editions of certain role-playing games, like D&D 3.5 had skill sets, and if you had certain skills at certain ranks, they would naturally generate this synergy, right? And so it was a great idea, and it's problematic mathematically. Like, you wouldn't want to do that with skills in a 5e based game or in a lot of other games, because it worked there, but it might not work elsewhere. But in terms of bringing species together and showing kind of like that teamwork, and like other games like Pathfinder had teamwork feats that accomplished the same exact thing. So it's not a completely new thing, but we wanted to focus on, as those 2 species developed, like in when species had relationships, they could then develop them. Now with attunement, when an individual or character in the world of Alessia chooses to focus their attention on an object or a place or another person, in the same way that they would attune in, like, say, a 5e game with a magical weapon, where they're either attuned or not attuned, they can step up through those levels of attunement. And it really comes into this idea of attuning to and then aligning in principle in kind of energies with something. And then in Alessia, you can also gain a degree of harmony. Now, as with Alessia, there's a little bit more. If you want to get that 3rd level of harmonizing with a thing, it often has other prerequisites. You may have to go on a quest. You may have to have the matching alignment of whomever you're harmonizing with. You might have to have done a certain thing. And these prerequisites are designed to encourage storytelling and narrative. Like, it's not just boom, you spend, whatever mechanical tokens you need to spend to get there. It's also about kind of incorporating that process with the story. And so attunement, in that degree, is focused on focusing on whatever those relationships are. And it also kind of gets away from that idea of recycling magical items and objects, because as you invest more attention, you repair, you rebuild, you almost kind of create this culture of focusing on items that have, more stability and endurance in the world, as opposed to just constantly throwing things away. It's a very wasteful approach. I'm not saying it's negative, but a lot of culture is reflective of the world we understand. And if we want to change and show a different world, we need to change and shift some of those values.
Right, and the attunement, the alignment, the harmonization can be done with people. They can be done with locations or objects, or just about anything that shows up is something that you can decide that you want to connect with. And the year connect with their megafauna, right? There's a process in which they bond to their megafauna, and that's something that's kind of interesting. Yo'el, you can tell us just a little bit about that ritual and that process and what that means.
Yeah, sorry about my continued
not a worry
issues. So the year are built to be very kind of psychically attached to the world, to their environment. And that plays a lot in the way that they were built. So they have a psychic attachment to their megafauna that they actually have their home in. That's their house, their home, right? That wanders around the vastness. They don't control it, but they need to always know where it is and how it's functioning and what's going on inside there, because they're almost like an immune system to this vast creature. And so you think about the same way that your cells need to be able to communicate with each other and get an idea of how your whole body is functioning at any given time to be able to mount those defenses, or heal those wounds, or shuffle and shuttle nutrients from one place to another, these kinds of things. So when you find a megafauna out in the vastness that isn't moving around, that's dormant, they begin this process of connecting to it and revitalizing it. And they use a bonding system that mechanically engages with the megafauna in the way that you guys were talking about, where you've got these multi-level bonding ladders. And so the year are going to bond with a megafauna and then know more and more about it the tighter their bond becomes with it. And it's part of their cultures are all ritualized to produce that effect. And so when you end up connecting with you're not just connecting with one individual, but it's this whole culture that's interconnected and that is directly bonded to the megafauna in this real psychic, visceral fashion. So you have multiple levels at play. And I kind of think about it in the same way that if you encounter a new society, you sometimes feel like you're not just talking to one person, you're kind of talking to their entire cultural background. And so it's like that, but it's much more real. It's much more kind of codified and specific when it comes to the year.
Right. So one of the things you're going to get with the Scourge of Shiran is a detailed breakout of the year. That's something that you can be including not only in your experiences in running this, but anytime you're in Shiran and you're in the vastness. These are definitely an inhabitant. There's definitely some other stuff that you're going to be getting through this that you can apply to the overall world and your play in that world. And some of those are actually classes, and we've extended the class base. Now, I think this was probably an intention all along, but we've managed to be able to get this into our release, and that's the shaman, right? So let's have Stephen talk a little bit about the shaman. He's the one that was able to create that for us, and I think we're all pretty excited. And thank you, Stephen, for joining our project.
Unmute. There we go. Yeah. New controls. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I came into this, the shaman was, if I remember right, and through reading the book, it was a class that was kind of meant to be in the book. Shamans are mentioned within the book, especially with their relationship to these spirits, these Kama. Is that how you say it? Kama? And
yeah, the Kaima.
The Kaima. And so, and for whatever reason, probably space and time.
It's space
Yeah.
and time. Yeah, we were 80 pages over our
Right,
budget.
right.
So,
You know, and the kind of things that happen is the class didn't manifest in the main book, and so it's been a lot of it's been fun to go and piece the bits together, and of course talking to Jaye and others about what they want in that class. And so in a lot of ways the shaman is a more primal version of the seer. The seer has a connection with this spirit world that is, I guess you could say, a more modern take on it. They can see into the world. It's all about, being able to either guide or serve these spirits in a way. And the shaman has a much more sort of ancient and visceral connection, built up through ritual and these personal relationships, sometimes esoteric personal relationships with these spirits instead of a more empirical one. And so they're a bit more based in tradition and sometimes a little weirdness, but they have a much more, I would say, visceral connection to that thing. And so they have probably something that's familiar-ish, but not, but a little more so. This personal relationship with a select spirit. They tend to gain more esoteric guidance from those things. They're a little bit more druidish. They're very into summoning their powers from that spirit world and manifesting it when needed in ways that are either really upfront or visceral or just kind of weird and useful.
Right.
That's the summary of the class in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that the setting has such interesting twists. I mean, when you're playing this and you hear like, oh, this is, adaptable for 5e or works with 5e, like, don't let that frame your understanding of the experience, because there's some major deviations, especially when it comes to, the classes and the roles that people play in those classes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm excited about, related to the shaman, I believe, is I don't know if we can talk about the Beast Riders a little bit. I know this is a new idea that we've got churning, and we're talking about it in relationship to writing a prequel adventure to the one that we're doing for the Kickstarter. This Kickstarter, Scourge of Shiran, is looking to take characters from 3rd level to about 5th level, I think, is what we're talking about. But then, a 1st, 2nd level prequel adventure involves a group of individuals that have a very special connection with animals and I guess perhaps even animal spirits. I'm not sure how much we want to put out there just yet, but Jaye, do you have any comments?
I think that was something Mike looked like he was going to jump on.
Mike, you want to talk about that?
His camp, and I've talked a lot already. So, Mike,
yeah. Why don't you go tell us about that, and then I'm going to have you tell us about Kolg too, because I want to hear more about the cities that are in.
So, hi everybody. I'm Mike Azzolino. I'm one of the authors and one of the developers, and I've got a few things to say just to catch up, because I've been hearing all your guys' comments and writing down my notes. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. All right. So, first and foremost, I guess I'm a professional game master. First and foremost, that's how I'm making my bread and butter these days. But I'm also, I think it's safe to say that I am the glue of this project. I brought all of these relationships together and in some way had a hand in bringing almost every single person involved in the project into it, except for maybe the art. And of course, I'm not talking about Yeti, because Yeti would be an extension of Jaye. But that's kind of been my role so far, and I'm really excited to be part of it. First off, in terms of being allowed to be in Alessia and to be given the freedom to create the way we have has been a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And to talk about Alessia as just another setting is really not fair. There's a lot of setting books where they're just, here are my ideas. This was my campaign. This is how we did with it. And these are these rules. That does not give Alessia, it doesn't even scratch the surface of what Yeti and Jay not only attempted to do, but succeeded in doing in many ways. It's a beautiful book. If you have not seen the book, the campaign primer is available on RPG, on Drive-Thru RPG. You can get PDFs or hard copies of it. It is a beautiful book. So the first thing, we saw this and we're like, wow. That's the first thing. Then we started looking into the meat and potatoes of it. We were like, really? Oh man, this is it's such a unique setting that I had to change the way that I think while developing this story with these guys, because all of the assumptions that we make in a modern setting, all of the assumptions that we make in a fantasy setting, all of that had to be discharged. It was really a rebirth, and then accepting the setting and then building from that. So that's been a big thing. I equate it to this. Alessia is Jay and Yeti's teenage daughter. And they allowed the Game Academy, myself included, to go out on a date with that daughter, but it was under very tight scrutiny, because they say, Josh said we were allowed to develop in Shiran and we were given all this freedom. It didn't really start out that way.
Not an analogy I would ever use.
I'm saying this way, like it's like
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's a weird
you
analogy.
trusted us with a child. Your child was this setting, and we treated her with respect, and we handled things really well. And then you guys were like, "Oh, I really like what you're doing." And I akin this to this. When we started, the agreement was everything that we develop and do cannot go global. It can't affect the whole world. It can only affect what we're working on. And we tried to work in that space, and we were really diligent about it. And then, like, some of these ideas blew up into really, really trusting places where Yeti's like, "Oh yeah, I like this," and he started allowing more things to be global, and that's when the trust was there. So I really love that. So that's all I wanted to say about that is being able to have the freedom to have someone say, "Here is my intellectual property, and I trust you to develop in that property," is amazing. It's like Robert Lynn asked for Thieves World stuff for me.
Yeah, I mean, to take that analogy just a little bit further, I think we went out on a date and then we fell in love, and everybody's like cool with it.
That's, kind of what I meant. So, the
weird analogy.
Not creepy, guys. Not creepy, I swear.
No, I wasn't trying to be creepy about it. So I think of, this planet nobody talked about. This is way bigger than Earth. It's a gas giant. That Alessia is a ginormous planet compared to Earth. So I look at vastness and Shiran as sort of like Canada with, in many ways, with the Arctic tundra like slapped right up against it. And that's the space that we've been developing in. So these megafaunas, they're mastodons. I don't think anybody mentioned that. They mentioned these giant hybrid creatures. Our megafauna that we're featuring are these ginormous mastodons that walk the surface of the vastness. No one understands the pattern. Not even the year who live inside of them understand the pattern of their movement or why they do what they do. Jay called them Roombas, and we've joked about this many times before. And I think they're kind of a cross between a Zamboni and a Roomba for the vastness, because they're cleaning up the ice in many places, and they're scooping up stuff that's left out there, and it's a really incredible thing. So the picture you just showed was the rhino. If you imagine the mastodon with many levels inside of it that the year occupy, so they live inside of this thing as their warren, as well as it being this animal movement thing. So that's really exciting. And I also want to give Yo'el props because he's a bit of a linguist, and he has gone to the extent of creating a real language for the year. We have a real alphabet. He's worked on phrasing, and he's a bit of a deep dive, but we love you for it. So the year have their own language, which at some point we'll be able to share with you, and you'll be able to hear just how crazy all of this is. So that was my earlier thoughts. What was the question you actually asked me to talk about?
Well, and the adventure, but
we were talking about the Beast Riders at first, because we were talking a little bit about how the shaman lead us into another kind of cultural group that live in Shiran.
I created 3 or 4. Well, we brainstormed 4 or 5 different backgrounds. So Alessia is based in 5e rules. So you have the background structure, the class structure. And we went with a Beast Rider being a background instead of a class, which it has been in other systems, has kind of tied it to a druid. They've tied it to a ranger in some cases. And this basically is a background that just shows an affinity for a large, generally rideable creature. We've used the wolves as the primary. They're like big dire wolves in Shiran, and there's the ilk, which are like a deer elk hybrid that can also be ridden, large cats. So the Beast Riders is one of the backgrounds that got developed parallel as we were writing the story, and we're going to figure out how to push all this out either before.
I believe the background is going to go in the Shiran's Player's Guide, which will be free for backers and free for everybody, really, just for them to get an introduction to Shiran.
That's great. That's awesome. So Shiran, great place. Kulg is the city that we've started our story in. And we were drawn to Kulg and one other city in Shiran because of their positioning on the vastness. And the vastness, after the tundra and the forest, you get the giant mountains, and beyond the mountains, it's nothing but frozen, right? It's just the vastness and the ice. So Kulg is a city that exists on the edge of the vastness. It's right on the edge of the mountains, and as a result of its position, it has a favorable position to the ley lines in the area. And historically, this place became a hotspot for the Order of Astrania, which is kind of like, I guess it would be like the global Mages Guild, right?
Well, they're the oldest guild of mages, yes, on the planet.
Right. So they love this place. As a result, have been here for a very long time and had a direct hand in how it was developed, its look, its style, and a lot of these kind of things. So as it is a fully modern. So again, Alessia, 7,000 years in the future. Technology and magic are so integrated in this system that you can't tell where one starts and another begins. They're that fully integrated. All right. So Kulg is this city right on the edge, and even though it is modern, has all the technologies and all of the everything the world has to offer, the Order of Astrania has tried really, really hard to keep an older, more classic look to it, using sacred geometry and prime numbers in its design and its layout. So even today in this really super modern, actually, I can show you what we have so far. I just hit the share screen button, yeah?
Yep, and then I'll throw it up there.
So share screen. And I don't want to be sharing that onto that. Cancel. It's not working.
Which one do you want to show?
Well, we've got. I was going to show the map without all the markings because I don't want to give too much away about the city.
Right.
I've got that right now. Actually, let me show that. Let me show that. Here we go. 5
being a prime number, hexagons being part of the whole sacred geometry idea. It plays into the design, and Kulg has got. Let me see. Oh yeah, there we go. So you can see that the city districts are kind of in the hexagons, and dead center in the middle is basically the airstrip. Now, one of the cool things about Kulg, it's sort of like the Miramar of Shiran. The best piloting academies and the best schools that teach combat flight and sky piloting, that kind of stuff, they're here. So there's a big draw to that here. So magic looking. It looks like a very modern place, even though all of these very basic arcane styles are integrated into it. Because it's on the edge of the frontier and they're subject to intense storms, incredible windstorms, shard storms, which we talked about a little bit, brine geysers. There's all kinds of events that can harm the city, and they have methods of shielding, and a lot of the structures are dome are dome or spherical shaped, providing less resistance to the elements and to the wind around it. So it's a very, very cool place. We have a bunch of different factions and a bunch of key individuals that the players will encounter while and that's just where they start. They just start the adventure in Shiran. Scourge of Shiran is going to play over basically a week's worth of, or for a home group, it would be 6 normal play sessions is what we intend Scourge of Shiran to play in. But just like any kind of sandbox that you've ever seen, whether you've made it yourself or whether you've bought it, this could be fleshed and stretched for many months. This could be all and to the letter, and have it play out in 6 or 7 sessions, however you want. So it's going to be a really versatile adventure. It's in an incredible setting, and that doesn't even touch on the STEM aspects of it and how we've leaned into real science.
Thank you for mentioning that. Can I cut in for a second, Mike?
Sure,
absolutely.
Because that was one of the things that I know Josh and I had mentioned in planning ahead of time that we did want to focus on, because I know there were some questions on the initial launch, both on Facebook and on I believe the Kickstarter page, where some educators and even some gamers wanted to see where some of those educational tie-ins in. And one of the things that the whole team has done a wonderful job is kind of identifying some of those science, technology, engineering, and math challenges, some of those STEM challenges that would normally be encountered in a future setting, and making them educational goals, not just to familiarize the player, through the lens of the character necessarily, but rather so that those goals can be discussed outside of the game. So when they're identified through the course of play, like at the Game Academy, when it's being done, I believe, Josh, is the summer camp, it's just played through and noted in a journal off to the side or whatever, and then the educators. But in an after-school setting or somewhere like that, the educator can then go through and talk about those STEM science concepts, like the mycelia network and how communication happens in other organisms. There's a lot of high-level STEM concepts that we're trying to. Well, we don't. There's not much to try to. I guess we're actually doing tries probably in this number. But yeah, there's a lot of cool STEM concepts. And Josh, you would be the better person to talk about.
Totally. No, I'll cut in and give a little bit of background. So the reason why this is designed to play in 6 4-hour sessions is that's the length that our summer camp is in the pandemic. Normally we run 5 days, and we have a summer camp that runs from 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and we have about 4.5 hours of playtime in one of those days. So we're looking at about 24 to 30 hours of run time that we have these participants, these kids, down in front of the game. So there's definitely, hitting your marks and making sure that you're on your time, and our staff is really adept at doing that. However, playing this game at home, we're going to be adding a lot more material. So it really, you can, as Mike was saying, you can take your time and really explore what's going on. But within the setting, I mean, this is a science fantasy world, but the science is a real science. It's not sort of a hand wavy science. We're not talking about warp drives and hyperspace. We're talking about geological structures and gravitation and how those things interact and species and evolution and
that brings us back to the terrestrial thing, Josh. If I cut in, because you asked earlier why we chose to focus on exploring the terrestrial world as opposed to going right out into space and outside of the normal. There's money and time and all those considerations. One of the main focuses that Yeti wanted to have, and I wish he were here to say this himself, and hopefully he'll pop in, but was he wanted he wanted kids at the table to be able to learn about the world around them through this fantasy setting, and exploring the terrestrial lands, it lets you do that.
Right. And so we have all of this richness that's there, and in the normal play, it's present. So what we've decided to do in this project is to make a special educator's version of the module where we make those things explicit to the educator, and we have call outs in the page. We're like, this is where we're talking about this. This is a good place for you to integrate it into your studies, and We're going to be providing student workbooks where the students will be able to track their journey through the adventure, but also their learning through the subjects. And that's all going to be in the same notebook. So that becomes an artifact that can be accessible. And we get to tie all of this into, the standards that we have, like Common Core standards and the next generation science standards. And this is really exciting because now as an educator, you can go to your administration and say, hey, I want to run this game in my class, and it's totally ties into all of the things I need to teach. And that means that we're all of a sudden hooking up this, what we understand as gamers, when you're in this type of environment, in this immersive experience, you're allowing your brain to make real connections with information that you remember, that it has context. It's something that, even like in your own lives, the things that relate to your lives and your story, you remember more than something you had to put down on a test. And that's the sort of barrier we're breaking here. And we're just trying to give educators as many tools as they need to make this a tremendous success. It's not just STEM, though. It's also sociology. It's
social sciences,
social sciences, political philosophy. There's, all of the, because we're also dealing in a world where it's not just, kill the cobalt, take the treasure. This is, there's 3 or 4 different factions that are trying to do something here. And, can we trust everything that everybody says? And do they even understand these issues to the level that actually maybe corresponds to, the truth? We're talking about critical analysis. We're talking about, verifying data. All of these things are practices that are directly transferable to science and other types
good
of
human skill sets to have.
Right.
Discernsion, media literacy, things that are in.
Yeah, if I can jump in, just really
jump in, Stephen. Yeah,
is this is probably, like, there's a lot of great ideas in this project, but this is the idea that I think is just the greatest. As somebody who grew up as a kid who was like, school's boring until I found role playing games, and then it's all like, oh, you can learn all sorts of stuff from that kind of thing. The ability to use role playing game to teach real life educational topics, I just think is brilliant, and I absolutely applaud that idea, Josh. It's so beautiful.
It's been a long time coming, and I think those of us that have been in the hobby for a long time, you hear this and you're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, why have we not been doing this all along?
Right.
So we're just happy to be able to finally pull the trigger on this, and hopefully those that are out there see the value in this and can help us be a success. I think that's we're going to be. This is going to be a trend for us at the Game Academy. It's going to be not only a trend with the work that we do with Storm Bunny Studios in the world of Alessia, but I think really for everything that we do, we really need to allow for it to go beyond the context of our own delivery, to allow others to take this into their contexts and to really have that rich experience. So we're really excited about this. We're going to be showing as we develop. We can probably even put some mock-ups of what this looks like over the next week or so on the Kickstarter page. We'll talk about it next week. I want to do another one of these, if we can, just to kind of keep people updated on what we're doing. We'll have a lot more show and tell, I think.
Speaking of, before you end this, I have one question. Stephen, were you done completely?
Yeah. I just.
Oh, okay. Because I thought you were trying to complete something too, and I didn't want to jump into my thought.
No. It was basically just that's one of the things that, there's a lot of exciting parts of this whole project, but the ability to do that and actually put that into place is just so gorgeous. Love it. That's it.
Speaking of show and tell, I shared something with you guys over the weekend, and if you're cool with me sharing screen, you talked about the player's guide, and I want to show something. I'm selfishly. Oh, Yeti made it in the.
Yeah, I don't know long. I apologize, Yeti. I don't know how long you've been on. It's below the fold for me, so I'm gonna take off this share screen. So there you are.
While we're getting him dialed in, one other thing that I wanted to mention that I think both Josh and Jay will probably have stuff to talk about is the fact that this adventure, Scourge of Shiran, was specifically made with non-violent victory conditions. At every step, at every encounter, almost. I mean, there are some circumstances, and this is a lesson to be learned, there are some circumstances you'll never be able to talk yourself out of. But for the most part, we have baked in non-violent victory conditions at every turn. And that's also something new for me, considering it as a game designer, and also just thinking of it, like you're saying, as the norm. So
right, we're giving a full toolbox to our players, not just a hammer.
In all fairness, other companies have definitely given you plenty of encounters with nonviolent alternate victory conditions. What I think makes Alessia slightly different is in our core book and throughout the course of play, we focus on de-escalation as a concept, which we have a class called the Peacekeepers that specifically deal like non-lethal damage by default as opposed to lethal damage so that they can take enemies into custody. We want to teach, we realize that what happens at the table informs culture outside of the game space, right? And if we're teaching, and this project specifically in the target audience is the 8 to 18 range, right? So if they're learning practical habits in the gaming space, we want to teach them to de-escalate because it's a good habit. I think Western culture, especially in America, needs to learn this lesson of de-escalation of conflicts because we've, at least in my lifetime, 30 plus years of heavy Hollywood culture that that almost enshrines the action hero violent reaction, and unfortunately that's really it's so far from where we need to be as a culture, regardless of your belief system. Like learning to talk to your neighbor and de-escalate situations in my mind space is just a good thing to teach other humans, right? Because we don't need to pull a gun every time something happens. So with a culture, with a game set in a future where there is this kind of collaboration and this sense of harmony between the species, it's not perfect, but it's a result of concentrated cultural work. So let's do that, right? Like, to me, it's just a no-brainer. And that was one of the things, and I'm going to give this to Yeti since he made it for the last few minutes, and I know it's late in Finland, but this is one of the things that I loved about the project when he brought it to me, because it's so radically different in assumptions, and it's beautiful for that. Yeti, would you say anything, or?
Hi. Yeah. Hi. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. It's been a little hectic evening, so. But yeah,
welcome, Yeti.
But yeah, it's I really like that aspect of let's say as well, that you have a multitude of choices that you can do. It's not just fighting, but it's all these other choices that you can do, and as well like many of the classes and that we have in the game have abilities and features that allow you to sort of like go around the straight up killing and all that stuff. So but yeah, it's
you want to maybe give us just a quick little view into what inspired you to create the world of Alessia? I know there's some real world grounding to that. Yeah, like I've really enjoyed both sci-fi and fantasy for a long time, and Alessia is like my dream vision of both of those genres, so to speak. So I really enjoy D&D, but I also enjoy a lot of sci-fi adventures. I played Traveler. I played Eclipse Phase and all those Fading Sun, all the other games that I really
Starfinder.
Starfinder. But that hadn't come out when I started designing Alessia. So, yeah. but yeah, it's and also I really wanted to do something a little bit different, because a lot of games when I was growing up were really like dark fantasy or dark modern, like vampire, and even a lot of the settings for Dungeons and Dragons, which I have it's like I have midnight and all such settings. So those are pretty dark. So I wanted to do something like on the other scale, so to speak. So very, very light. And I've always enjoyed Eastern mythology. So that was also something that I wanted to incorporate into the setting. So it's a sort of like a combination of a lot of stuff that I really enjoy. So
yeah, I have to say one of the things I really appreciate is that it's not just a rehash of European, Western, medieval fantasy.
It's also not an Asian monoculture too. Let me
No.
We did not put forward the illusion that everything that is not Western is the same thing. That is not what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that the planet is so huge. Yeah. There's other things going on with other groups of people, and we don't know yet. That's not in the story yet, but it's happening. And so, the world of Alessia represents a lot, and we're seeing the first page of what's going on, and so far it's beautiful, and I'm excited.
I want to share a screen too before I forget.
Yeah,
Please do. Guide, and I shared something. I mentioned over the weekend that I shared something with you guys, and we talked about character progression and the focus on the heroic, and one of the things that makes Alessia a lot of fun. And so you're going to see this in the update, backers, because you're probably going to watch this when we post the link. But I'm going to share our little Christmas gift, or rather our Yule gift that we're going to be sharing. This is not entirely done, but we're really close. Our players will be getting a little bonus player's guide, or rather a player's notebook. And as you can see here, this little gift that we're giving will basically take them. It's when it's finished, it'll be about 140 pages. The current version is 126, and it allows a character, or rather a player, to track their character's progression through all 20 levels of play. It allows them to take notes, keep character goals per level by level. Those can be revised as they go through. I'm just kind of skipping through here quick, but every time you hit a new level, right, you get to second level or whatever, you'll see an option to change those goals. It's third level. I guess I'm going ahead of myself, but you get the idea. It's this whole journal that you can just print as you need to and follow your character's goals and such.
Right. I love how you're allowed, or you're not allowed, that you give space for this idea of progression, and so you can have your first level character, your second level character, and so you really get to see the story that happens. So often, one of the sort of artifacts of us having character sheets is that they get overwritten, either if they're digital or if they're paper. You don't remember what you look like in first level.
You don't see the story. You see where you're at in the story, and that's important. But the legacy of your story is just as impactful, and it tells you about the narrative. And what GM doesn't want to not have that progression at the table as opposed to a sheet.
Plus the reflections that the characters have and the players have. Right there in the notebook. This is something that will be essential to the educational use of Scourge of Shiran, and we'll have this or a branded version of this, maybe with some additional things in there for our student players when they engage with this at that level. So it's very exciting. Good stuff. And I think there's a number of things here that are they're pushing new frontiers, I think, with the way that we approach this type of collaborative storytelling. And they're natural evolutions. It's not like you look at them and you say like, oh, I never would have thought of that. It's more like, why didn't we have that already? But now hopefully we're going to be setting some trends. It's going to be fun to watch.
Right.
Yeah. So let me see. Do we have any questions? We've got some folks that have said hello. I think everybody's just been kind of
let's do listening. The PBS. Let's do the PBS pledge now. So obviously we have a live Kickstarter going. Everybody knows this. We need your help to spread the word, to support the project, and to get other people who are gamers and educators and people who would be interested in this to support the project as well. A friend of the project and a member of the team. He's doing some art asset work for us. He shared with us an idea today that I want to say, because I think it's a wonderful idea. He asked all his loved ones if they wanted to get him a present for the holiday season, whatever you want to call it, a Yule present. He asked them to get him a Kickstarter. In other words, to support the Kickstarter for us. And I'm going to make the same request right now. If you are in a position where you are going to buy a Yule present, a holiday present for me, I ask you for Giftmas to give me more Kickstarters so then we can turn around and make more books available to educators. We have a level that when we reach a certain level and you pledge at a certain level, you will be providing this material at no cost to educators. You will be enhancing the life of children, whether they're yours or not. And that's really super important because at the bottom line, at the end of the day, both of these organizations right here, these guys right here, they're about making better human beings. Yeah. And that's why I'm him too, and him too. We're all about making better human beings. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. So
and that's, I think that's important to say as we close this out, because that's one of the reasons Yeti and I are so willing to trust the Game Academy and so happy to engage the Game Academy, because we understand it's not just about providing to communities or bringing new gamers that might otherwise be marginalized into this hobby and creating a space. It's a cultural shift. It has an idea and it has a vision, and they want better humans. And I love the idea that we can celebrate this hobby in a positive, constructive way that is beyond just showing that we support one another, but in a way where we think and behave differently. I love the idea that Josh and his whole team wants to build better humans, and it's why we were so apt to just jump in, and why Alessia and the Game Academy just bread and butter, man, bread and butter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's pretty good for today. I'm going to add Steven's on screen hide here for a moment, but I'm just going to add him back in just so we can say thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being on the project, everybody. I am so thrilled to be a part of this team. It's been really exciting stuff that we're creating, and I know that when everybody out there sees what we have, you're going to agree with us. So keep on the channels, subscribe to whatever thing you subscribe to, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, we got it all. And we'll keep you updated in this format and also on the Kickstarter page with updates.
And make questions available to all of us. And the next time we do this, it'll give us things to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have plenty to talk about, Mike. I don't think we need things, but we definitely want to answer any questions you have.
Yeah. Leave comments on the Kickstarter page, questions there. You can send email to me, Joshua, at thegameacademy.org, or at Michael at thegameacademy.org. We'll be able to catch those questions and integrate them into discussion. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks. Anybody have any words they want to say before we say goodbye? All right. Fantastic.
Have a great week.
Well, I just want to say that I'm really enjoying when Jay first told me about the Game Academy stuff. I was like, right away, like, okay, this is something that I really wanna pursue. So I'm really happy that you guys are with us on this. So
absolutely.
As are we.
Yep.
As are we.
Yep. So you heard it.
I'm surprised in closing, Yo'el doesn't have like a closing, like a little phrase in year for us, but we'll work it. Next time we'll have one.
You'll get to hear it prepared, but I can have some dialogue for next time.
Totally awesome. Totally awesome.
Yeah.
We have a language.
Yeah, it's not just STEM. We're talking linguistics and humanities here, folks, too. So it's a full course meal. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to close this out. Anybody else, remember, put something in the chat. Talk to us on the Facebook, the Kickstarter chat area, the comments area, and we will talk to you soon.
Have a great week.